One thing has been very, very clear over the last week and probably even before then. Donald Trump wasn't going to stop until he found someone who would go ahead with his plan to indict James Comey. And he found that someone in Lindsay Halligan. Now, if you did not know who Lindsay Halligan was before today, I don't really blame you. Maybe you'd heard her name, but maybe you don't know a lot about her. She was only just sworn in as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia on Monday. Up until a week ago, she was the person Trump put in charge of reducing the amount of mentions of things like, say, slavery at the Smithsonian Museum in D.C. And this is how she defended that work.
What I saw when I was going through the museums personally was an overemphasis on slavery, and I think there should be more of an overemphasis on how far we've come since slavery. Our country is a country of progress, and it's the greatest country in the world, and we should be able to take our kids, our students through the Smithsonian and feel proud when we leave. There's a lot of history to our country, both positive and negative, but we need to keep moving forward. We can't just keep focusing on the negative.
Okay, let me just note, that clip is from about a month ago, so it's not an ancient clip, about a month ago. And that is the person Donald Trump found to prosecute a case against the former director of the FBI, one he has been wanting to happen for a long time. Joining me now is Andrew Weissman, MSNBC legal analyst and former top prosecutor for the Justice Department. Andrew, you are the person I wanted to talk to most, and I think everybody watching wanted to hear what they thought, given your history and your just incredible ability to explain things. I want to know your thoughts, just in general, given I think this moment really leaps over what we've seen in the past. How are you digesting it?
There's so much here, but let's start with, we do not know, and the indictment doesn't tell us exactly what the specifics are as to why the government and now the grand jury believes that there's probable cause for these two charges. And so we really have to await that. In other words, let's see whether there are any facts to support what has happened here. And by the way, if there were the crime of making false statements to Congress or obstructing Congress, those are serious. And it doesn't matter that it's the former head of the FBI any more than it mattered when it was Donald Trump as the former president, who was indicted himself for obstructing justice not once but twice in the Florida case. So that's sort of to one side, but the real story, I agree with you, Jen, is about the process here. Let me just take you inside what would normally happen. Leave aside the whole part about that you now have a new U.S. attorney. You've covered that. But let me just tell you what a new U.S. attorney would want to do and would happen in any major case, which is you would sit down and look at the evidence. You would meet with your prosecutors and understand their reservations. The reporting is that the career people did not think that there was enough to go forward here. Remember, they have to be able to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. You'd also want to afford the opportunity to Jim Comey and his legal team to hear their position. And only after that would you make a decision. And there's no evidence that that entire process happened in the New York minute that Ms. Halligan has been in her position. So that's just one more, I would say, significant sort of due process foul that's going on here. And I think the proof in the pudding here is going to be, in sort of looking forward, is I think there's a really good chance that James Comey and his legal team will ask for a speedy trial. They have a right to a trial within 30 days of today. And they could ask for a speedy trial. I did note that Jim Comey has already been on Instagram and said, let's have a trial. And to me, that suggests that if they really think that there is no there, we don't know the answer to that. But if they presumably do, we could see in 30 days all of this blowing up in Donald Trump's face. And everything that he thinks is a victory now is going to really show that this is the emperor has no clothes, that this is the abuse that it appears to be.
Comey's not the only person on President Trump's radar. Last week, and we saw him press Attorney General Pam Bondi to charge Senator Adam Schiff. Letitia James as well. He's called for a number of other political enemies to face prosecution. What are you and other Democratic lawmakers prepared to do in response in this moment? And realistically, what can you do in the minority?
Right. I mean, unfortunately, that's the question, right? Particularly on the House side, the minority has almost no power at all. We have something of a bully pulpit. It doesn't begin to compare to the president's bully pulpit, but we're going to continue to tell the story of the complete corruption of our legal system in the service of Donald Trump's political objectives here. And by the way, what the implications for that may be down the road. You know, my Republicans friends live day to day. Today is another day in which they don't want to get lit up on Truth Social by the President of the United States. So they don't have the perspective to think to themselves, my God, what about if these precedents that we are establishing ultimately get used against us by a malign Democratic president? You know, they're so far from even thinking that. And of course, what they do is they are like, oh, well, you know, this was just, they did it to Donald Trump. They did it to Donald Trump. Guess what? Donald Trump broke the damn law, right? And we know that because he was convicted of doing so in New York. And we know that because we also heard and saw what he said prior to January 6th. And look, I think the notion that, you know, Donald Trump has always been willing to overstep the rules, to break the law, is not exactly a novel notion. So this whataboutism that like, oh, they did it to Donald Trump is just yet another excuse and a self-rationalization so that my Republican friends can look themselves in the mirror in the morning without throwing up.
I should note, I'm not a lawyer. I've learned from all of you, but there is a tremendous leap from an indictment to a conviction. I think everybody watching knows that. Last night, I was talking with Preet. We knew even less last night, so I should just note that. And we were talking about, though, kind of the case that his lawyers could make, to your point. And he was kind of laid out the notion that Comey could allege, potentially, depending, selective and vindictive prosecution. What would that entail? What do you think of that? And if they made that argument, what would that entail?
So those are very hard arguments to make, but what I would say is if it's ever going to work for vindictive prosecution, this looks like it. And so vindictive prosecution is where you are looking for someone being singled out for impermissible reasons. And so just because you did your job, but just because you referred the president or you opened an investigation into the president, those are not legitimate reasons to have a sort of tit for tat. And so that kind of claim, again, could really blow up in Donald Trump's face. Imagine if that motion, I think, will certainly be made. Imagine the judge in this case, who's a very, very experienced judge who's been on the bench either as a magistrate or a district judge appointed by President Obama to the district court, holding a hearing on this. Imagine what that would look like where Jim Comey gets to put witnesses on. This is the kind of thing where, you know, I don't know that the White House really thought through sort of giving James Comey this forum to be heard, where he is going to be able to potentially call witnesses and have a trial. And as I said, I really think this is one where this is such a horrendous moment for the rule of law, for the Department of Justice, for the country writ large. But I do think that there is the potential for a little like we saw with Mr. Kimmel, that this with Jimmy Kimmel, is that we could see a reversal here where in, you know, matter of weeks, where we see sort of real pushback by the judge, by a jury, in terms of at a hearing, in terms of what happens here. So as bad as tonight is in terms of the rule of law in America and sort of going down the road of a sort of Nixonian Hoover type use of the legal system, this is one where I do have sort of cautious optimism in terms, if there really is no there there, that the system will hold.
I think I am happy to hear that. I think a lot of people watching are happy to hear that. And 30 days would be a very quick turnaround, or would feel like a quick turnaround. Let me ask you, since I have you, about a couple things. We're trying to understand all the different details that have been reported out, and whether it's significant or not, and you can tell us. So we know that Halligan has never prosecuted a criminal case of any kind before. And according to NBC, she filed multiple charging documents in the same case, which she told the judge when the judge asked her about them, she had not seen. Her signature was on them. Is that a normal thing that could happen? Is that a sign of inexperience, or how do you read that?
Well, in order to sign the indictment, the U.S. attorney, the sitting U.S. attorney, has to sign. And presumably, she's not saying that she didn't see the document she signed. But a lot of times, there are people who are lower level who sign on behalf of the U.S. attorney. So I wouldn't take. There's so many things to be upset about. That's not the one that I would get really upset about.
Donald Trump has never been subtle about his motives. He wanted James Comey punished, and when the Justice Department wouldn't play along with his plan, he just kept searching until he found someone who would do it for him. I'm going to redo that. Donald Trump has never been subtle about his motives. He wanted James Comey punished, and when the Justice Department wouldn't play along, he kept searching until he found someone who would. That someone turned out to be Lindsay Halligan, a person with zero criminal prosecution experience who, days before, was more worried about whether the Smithsonian... That person turned out to be Lindsay Halligan, a person with zero criminal prosecution experience who, days ago, was more worried about whether the Smithsonian talks too much about slavery than enforcing the rule of law. Think about that. Trump handpicked someone whose resume screams politics, not justice, and gave her the keys to one of the most powerful... Think about that. Trump handpicked someone whose resume screams politics, not justice, and gave her keys to one of the most powerful prosecutors' offices in America. This is not strength, it's not patriotism, it's the opposite, an abuse of the system to settle scores. Trump talks about law and order, yet he treats the law like a personal weapon. That's not what leaders do, that's what strongmen do. And the result is dangerous. Every time Trump drags the justice system into his vendettas, he erodes faith in the courts, in prosecutors, in the very idea that the law applies equally under democracy. He isn't protecting America, he's protecting himself. If this case blows up, and it very well... If this case blows up, and it very well might, it'll expose once again that Trump's obsession isn't justice. It's personal vendettas. It's revenge.